So the first topic of your organic chemistry. Organic chemistry is all about compounds, hydrocarbons, their chemistry, reactions, mechanisms, then fraction distribution of crude oil एक आता है, isomerism, the structural properties of those compounds, how they react, the products, and different types of homologous series. We have, if we talk about your IGCSE course, we have alkanes, alkenes, alcohols, and carboxylic acid. And lastly, we have esters and macromolecule polymerization as well. So these are the 3 to 4 topics of your organic chemistry. So we'll start with the first chapter of organic chemistry unit, which is organic chemistry and fuels. All these slides are made by me, and my name is Igcse. So names of compounds. Organic compound names, structures, and types. So let's start with a basic introduction. Organic chemistry क्या है? Organic chemistry is the scientific study of the structure, properties, and reaction. Look at this. It's the structure. Study of the structure, properties, and the reactions of organic compounds. Organic compounds are those which contain carbon. So you know one thing that any molecule that contains carbon, ठीक है, carbon क्या है? On the periodic we know carbon is 6 and 12. So any compound that will contain carbon is known to be organic. So for conventional reasons, when metal carbonates, carbon dioxide, and carbon monoxide are not included in organic compounds. So what is the definition of hydrocarbon? By the name you can tell hydro means hydrogen, carbon means carbon. So all those compounds that contain only hydrogen and carbon atoms. So if I ask you that if I have an element, I have C6H12O6. Now this is not a hydrocarbon. This is an example of glucose. Is this an hydrocarbon? No, it's not, because it does contain carbon, it does contain hydrogen, but it's having an oxygen. And we just talked about that hydrocarbons only contain carbon and hydrogen. So only alkanes and alkenes, your first two homologous series, would contain hydrocarbons. Other than that, if we talk about alcohols, they have oxygen as well. If we talk about carboxylic acids, yeah, amines, they have nitrogen, oxygen as well, but they do not only contain hydrogen and carbon. Then you should also be knowing about three more things, which are a general formula, a structural formula, and a displayed formula. And the difference between three of these. तीनों के दरम्यान, what is this difference? A general formula is a formula that states the ratio of atoms of each element in the formula of every compound in a particular homologous series. For example, C3H8. So what does a general formula tell us? The number of carbon atoms in every element, the number of hydrogen atoms in every element. Now this is the general formula for a compound named propane. Now this general formula tells us that there are 3 carbons and 8 hydrogens in propane. So this is what a normal general formula tells us. But what is the structural formula? By using this general formula, we can draw its structure. And structure formula is a condensed representation that shows the symbols for each atom in a compound with straight lines joining them to represent the covalent bonds. Now, the 3 carbons you can see over here and the 8 hydrogens have been attached. Now, this is what we call as a structural formula. Now, some basic rules of structural formula. Now, this you can note down if you want. For example, hydrogen can form maximum of one bond. Oxygen can form maximum of two bonds. Carbon can form a maximum of four bonds, and nitrogen can form a maximum of three bonds. Now, these are some basic rules of the bonds, and this is going to help you in drawing every type of structure, which I tell my students. Then we have a displayed formula. Displayed formula is a graphical representation that shows the symbols for each atom in a compound with straight line joining to represent the covalent bonds. Now, combustion. What is combustion? Whenever you hear the term combustion, this is going to be burning. Exactly. And burning in the presence of oxygen. अब combustion किसी भी चीज की हो, now these compounds undergo complete and incomplete combustion. Now there's a difference between a complete combustion and incomplete combustion, and the difference is in the products. The products would be different for complete combustion and they would be different for an incomplete combustion. Now, complete combustion की अगर बात करें सबसे पहले, this occurs when there is an excess oxygen. So water and carbon dioxide are going to form. For example, we have methane over here. Methane is CH4. No need to note down because we अभी हमने ये सारी homologacies पढ़नी. We have to study these homologacies one by one. Methane, then we have oxygen, and in complete combustion, always two products are going to be formed: carbon dioxide and water. But if we talk about incomplete combustion, when does this type of combustion take place? When the products are different. For example, methane, CH4, reacts with oxygen, which is in lesser amount. Okay, when oxygen is not given to us in large amounts, or when oxygen is not in excess, now the products will be different. In incomplete combustion, they are going to be carbon monoxide, harmful product, carbon, or we can call it as soot as well. We call it, this is a black carbon. You can also say as it's like after burning coal, ठीक है, जब हम कोयले को जलाते हैं और we when we burn coal, the black powder or the black ash that is left behind, that is also known as soot. So these are the products in incomplete combustion, and these are the products of complete combustion. Now, incomplete combustion occurs when there is insufficient oxygen. So this is the need for the incomplete combustion to take place. Whenever the amount of oxygen is less, incomplete combustion will take place. So burn either carbon monoxide and water, or carbon and water would form. So these will be the products when we talk about incomplete combustion. Carbon monoxide and water, or carbon and water are going to be formed. Names of compounds. Now, the names of organic compounds have two parts. One of them we call as the prefix, and the other one is known as the suffix. Prefix and suffix में क्या होता है? For example, अगर मैं यहाँ लिखूँ methane. Now, what is the prefix and what is the suffix in this? अगर मैं बात करूँ meth. Meth is the prefix and ane is the suffix. The prefix is going to tell you how many carbon atoms are present in the longest continuous chain in the compound. Now, meth means one carbon, eth means two, prop means three, bute means four, and so on. That we'll talk about. And the suffix is ane, A and E, tells you what functional group is the compound. So, ane represents alkanes, ene represents alkenes, all represents alcohol, oic acid represents carboxylic acids, and O8 represents esters that we're going to study in the further lectures as well. So this is how one of the name has two parts, prefix and suffix. The prefix tells us the number of carbons, and the suffix tells us the functional group. So look at this, we have a table in front of us. The first part of the name and the second part of the name, what do they represent? The first part, as we just said, represents the number of carbon atoms. And the second part represents the functional group, which is the suffix. Now, number of carbon atom, meth represents 1, eth represents 2, prop represents 3, bute represents 4, pent 5, hex 6, and so on. We have heptane, hept 7, oct 8, non 9, and dec as 10. Then these different names you can see as ane. Ane would represent alkane, ठीक है? Ene represents alkenes, एनॉल से अगर कोई एंड होगा, फॉर एग्जाम्पल प्रोपानॉल, प्रोपानॉल वुड मीन इट्स अ 3 कार्बन अल्कोहल. एनोइक एसिड रिप्रेजेंट्स कार्बोक्सिलिक एसिड्स. अगर कहीं पे एमाइन है, एमाइन फॉर एग्जांपल ब्यूटामाइन, प्रोपाइन, प्रोपेनामाइन, मिथामाइन, वो सारे क्या होंगे? एमाइन ग्रुप से होंगे विच कंटेन नाइट्रोजन. आयल एनोएट, हेक्साइल एथेनोएट, इथाइल एथेनोएट, प्रोपाइल ब्यूटानोएट, ये सारे O8 O8 क्या है? They represents ester because the term 8 always represents oxygen. So we are going to name them as. Now each of these series have a specific functional group as well. For example, ane का कोई functional group नहीं because all of the carbon are present in single bonds. Ene, double bond are present. This is a speciality for alkenes. When we talk about alcohols, they have a functional group of OH. We also call it the hydroxyl group. Carboxylic acids have a functional group of COOH. Amines have a functional group of NH2. NH2, this is the group that we actually call amine. And this group is called carboxylic group, and this group is called hydroxyl group. Then we have C double bond OO. This COO represents an ester, and this is formed when we combine an alcohol with a carboxylic acid. Got it?
Okay.
So here we have some examples of different molecules. This is methane. Now, meth represents one carbon, ane represents all single bonds will be present. Ethane, eth represents two carbon atoms, and it's an alkane. Then we have ethene. Ene represents, this is from the alkenes group, which contain carbon double bond carbon, and eth says that it contains two carbons. Then we have ethanol. Ethanol represents that this is an alcohol, and eth represents that there are going to be two carbons in it. Ethanoic acid. Oic acid represents that this is from a carboxylic acid group which contains COOH, and eth represents two. So this is how we are going to identify this, and no need to worry because we have to study each of these series separately in the upcoming chapters as well. We're going to talk about each and every homologous series. Then we have bromoethane. Bromo represents that it is an halogenoalkane. Halogen होगा इसके अंदर. Either it can be iodine, chlorine, bromine, fluorine. ठीक है, and ethane, eth represents two, and ane represents carbon-carbon single bonds. This is an alkane. Further rules for naming compounds. Now, how do we name compounds is another strategy. When there is more than one carbon atom, where a functional group can be located, it is important to exactly which carbon the functional group is on. When we are naming compounds and when we have a functional group as well. Now, what are functional groups? I told you for alkanes, we have no functional groups. For alkenes, we have carbon, double bond carbon, representing the functional group. Then for alcohols, we have OH, hydroxy group. For carboxylic acids, we have COOH as the functional group. So these are the three very important functional groups in your syllabus right now. The rest is studied in A levels. Each carbon is numbered, and these numbers are also used to describe where the functional group is. Now, when two functional groups are present, di is used. Di represents, and if I say what does tri means, tri represents three. Quadra, quadra will represent four. So these are some of the abbreviations we use to number any type of functional group. If the functional group is present twice, it's called di. If it's three times, we call it tri, which is used as a prefix to the second part of the name. Branching also needs to be considered. Now, in many molecules, when we talk about structural and discrete formula, branching is also there. The carbon atoms with the branches are described by their number. When the location of functional groups and branches needs to be described, the functional group takes precedence, so the functional group has the lowest number. Examples of branched molecules, you can see a lot of branched molecules, 2,3-pentanediol, 3-methyl pentanoic acid, and 5-methyl hexene. We're going to study in the further topics that how we're going to name it, but this is called branches. कौन-कौन सी branches you can see? This is a branch, this is a branch, this is another branch, this is another branch, whereas this is known as a straight chain, this is known as a straight chain, and this is also known as a straight chain. So there are a lot of rules for naming that, and that separate topic is known as nomenclature.